freehand ink drawing is a great way to draw. There's a great freedom in just putting that ink directly on the paper, but there's obviously challenges. We can't erase anything. Every mark we put for any reason will still be there at the end. So perhaps this requires a different way of thinking and of drawing. Here are the 10 ways I think strategize, put marks on paper and progress my drawing and finish my drawing that I think help me give myself the best chance of the sort of drawing I'm after, despite the fact that every mark will be there. So we're using this scene from Oxford University to put these 10 tips into practice. Let's go. The first thing I do is I find eye level. Eye level is a perspective term, and it's important because for a building that's angled away from us, as the two sides of this building are, it determines where the horizontal lines start to angle, start to slope, and also how much they slope. Because at eye level, if there is a line, it will be horizontal. Above that, the lines angle more and more to the left or to the right. So in this case, what we're doing is we're looking at the windows, and we'll look at the windows on that first floor, the top and bottom of those 3 sets of windows. And we'll note that the horizontal lines created by the 3 windows together both slope downwards on both sides, because eye level is going to be the same in the entire drawing, across the whole drawing. There's only one eye level in any one scene. So that's what we're looking for. So because they both slope in the same direction, we know that eye level is going to be further down. If we look at the windows to the right of the door on the ground floor, the lower alignment of those 3 windows actually slopes slightly upwards. If we look at the top, it looks pretty close to being straight, being horizontal. I think it still angles very slightly down, which means that eye level is going to be just below those, which actually in this case lines up with where the eye level of a person might be. But eye level is to do with where the camera was. So if the camera was maybe elevated, standing on something when this was taken, eye level might be more level with the first floor. So we can't go by where the eye level of a person in the scene would be, although it can overlap if the ground is level. So once I find the eye level, I know that every horizontal line above that angles, but the angle increases with every horizontal line. So look at the tower, look at the very top cornice that we have there, decorative banding that we have at the very top. Look at how much greater that angle is than the one that's halfway down the side of the building. The closer we get to eye level, the shallower those angles become, and it's the same on both sides. The angles won't be the same unless we're looking at 45 degrees. That brings us to our second tip, and that's be strategic with our starting point. By strategic, I mean start in the place that's going to give us the best chance of drawing this well, of drawing this accurately. And it may not be the main subject. It may be something right down the front, or it may be in the center of our subject. It may not be at ground level. I find when I draw street scenes, it's never at ground level. There's too much clutter. It's too hard to disentangle that at the start. I try to find the shapes that I can draw most easily in proportion and at the scale I want for my drawing, which in this case is the same size as my reference. And so square or rectangular shapes generally are the easiest things to start with. Sometimes that might be a wall, but often it's just a window and then I draw the wall around it. But once I've started, I can move out, left, right, up and down, aligning what I'm yet to draw with what I have already drawn. So this buttress that comes out at 45 degrees from the corner lets me see straight on to that edge, and that in my mind is the easiest way to start. And so the third point, once I've drawn something, I keep checking what I've drawn back to the reference to make sure that it's what I thought. Now, if it's not, there may not be much I can do about it at that point. There might be especially if we've drawn a bit lightly, often we can make slight adjustments, nudging where the visual attention is drawn to a slightly different place. But even if not, I can possibly make adjustments with the next part I draw to bring things back into an overall adjustment. So into an overall alignment with the photo. So I need to always keep my wits about how accurate have I been, and if I haven't quite got it right, how can I compensate for that? What I like to do with these angles is I put a dot where I think the line will end, and then I measure between the two ends like this, and then that lets me check my estimation. Now, I don't always do it in real life now because I have practiced that skill a lot, but when we're learning, it's a great thing to do. But always put the dot first. Always have a go guessing where that line's going to be, and then see how right are you. And if you're not right, was your angle too high or too low? But it's a really important skill, estimating angles by eyeballing what we see. We know that all of these horizontal lines will go to a vanishing point. They'll all join up together for this wall, but we're not going to establish that. You need to learn to be able to work out these angles and have them look right without actually having a vanishing point off the page. The fourth point is when we're trying to place things horizontally, say these windows that move out, don't measure the diagonal. If there is a diagonal line for a wall, don't measure that and try and draw that. Imagine in your mind an absolute horizontal line going from side to side. So if we look at the tower here, you can see in a few places I've drawn a horizontal line across the tower. That's when I've been estimating where to put a dot to indicate the width of that tower on my drawing. I find that going down a diagonal, invariably I make my width too wide. I find it's far more accurate to do it that way. Fifth tip, be careful with overlaps. And by overlaps, I mean things such as this bare branch tree on the left. With pen, it can be tricky, and it can be tempting just to draw things over the top of other things, especially when things are fairly thin and they're layered in front of each other. But what that does is it brings everything to the same level, to the same depth from the viewer. And we want to create a sense of depth of some things being closer than others. So these things can be a bit fiddly, but they're not nearly as fiddly once we've developed the skill, the technique of doing it. And so you'll notice even with my branches, I haven't drawn them over the top of each other. I've got some branches where I stop and then start again on the other side of a branch that's closer to us. Now, I don't have to do it manically. I don't have to do it really, really precisely. I create the effect in parts, and then it makes it look like I've done it more than I actually have. And then the building also, I don't draw straight through the branches. That's why I draw the branches first. We draw the closest things first, and I like to leave a bit of a halo, a bit of a gap between things as they pass in front or behind each other. And if you look at the vertical line for one of the walls, and also the one I'm doing now, I don't draw those straight through the branches, but instead I leave gaps. And see how that creating that visual disruption means that we get a sense of the tree being in front, that we would really lose if we took the quicker option of just drawing over the top. The sixth point is be aware of values. Now, values are lights and darks, and we normally create them when we hatch. So with these windows, I'm doing some lines very close together to hatch to create a dark shadowed effect. But sometimes with architectural scenes such as this, the detail can be quite small for the size of our drawing, and particularly depending also on the width of our pen, the outlines of different important parts can end up being so close together that it creates the effect of hatching, which can make some parts of the building look a lot darker than is in life. this scene is in Oxford, and if you look at yesterday's video, there's another building that's of a similar era, and that was the problem I had with the windows stacked on top of each other with some carvings and balconies and things on the tower. And it finished up looking blacker on my drawing than I'd wanted, not because I'd done cross-hatching, but because the detail was just so close together. So something to look out for. The seventh point is we can hold the pen at a low angle to the paper, almost horizontal, and that lets us draw a lighter line. I'm doing it now. A lighter line that can almost work as a guideline. We can't erase it, of course, but that's okay. The eighth point, we need to vary the marks we use wherever possible, and foliage creates a great opportunity to do that. But look at the driveway I've just drawn, the edge of where the grass is. It would have been easy and perhaps even natural to draw pretty much a straight line there. Instead, I've done a series of dashes and dots and whatnot, and they're a bit heavier, closer and thicker, closer to us than further away. Notice how that creates the effect better of the grass and of the distance than if I just drawn a straight line. I want to create marks that contrast with the straight lines of the house. Architecture does give us a lot of straight edges and angles and whatnot. And so finding other marks that can provide some interest is very helpful, I think, for our overall drawings. And again, with this tree on the right-hand side, although winter is approaching, some of the leaves are still hanging on. And now remember, I'm drawing this at just over 3 times my normal drawing speed. So I'm going a lot slower. It's taking more time. It was a bit of a commitment to the drawing at this late stage. But sometimes these support acts, as I think of them as, can take as much time or even longer than the star of the show. So we need to be prepared to put that time in, which brings me to the ninth point. Don't neglect the foreground or the edges. Usually we center the thing we're really interested in. It's tempting to perhaps, once that's done, try and rush or not take as much care or bother with the other elements. It's a big mistake. We need to have the commitment for the whole scene. And as I said, sometimes the support acts actually are more effort and fuss. And now a few marks for the stonework, but where I'm suggesting horizontal rows between the undressed stonework, that needs to follow the perspective angles. And again, variation of marks, strengthening just some of those branches. And the 10th one is, at the end, we need to stop and look at our drawing overall. At that point, usually I'm not looking at my reference anymore, because most of the time people don't look at your reference as well as your drawing, they just look at your drawing. And so I need to be thinking, okay, how can I fine-tune this? Are there any lines or marks that need to be strengthened? In this case, I thought the tower needed to be, so I'm doing that now. Are there any values, any lights and darks that need to change? I can't lighten the lights, but I can darken the darks, and I decide to do that even after I've taken the tape off in a moment. I darken the foliage in that bottom right corner, which is amongst the closest things to us, and I feel it just works more nicely to create a sense of just things being a bit closer there. So it's important that we take the opportunity, even when we think we're finished, to improve in a way that we can only improve on with hindsight, not hindsight so much as, but having finished the drawing. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope these 10 tips are helpful. If you want to have a go drawing this wonderful little building, you'll find a link to the reference photo in the video description below. But remember, whatever you draw, however it turns out, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.